Okay, so we'll get started with the lesson for today. This is the anchor chart that I shared with you on Google Classroom and also send it to your folks to print off. And this is a good one to have printed off because you can kind of use this as a reference sheet anytime that you are doing comparing or ordering decimals. It's 4 little easy steps just to kind of help your brain stay focused on how do I do this kind of a thing. So real quick, we're just going to go over the 4 steps. These are things we talked about last week, but it's nice to have it all on one sheet. So here's step 1. It says stack the numbers that are being compared, line up the decimal points. So this one, they had 4.8, 4.826, 4.08, 4.006. What's the most important is line them up on the decimal point, put all your ones on top of the ones, put all your tenths on top of the tenths, and so on, all for your numbers out. Now, the one thing we haven't talked about yet is, do you notice how some of these numbers, they don't have as many numbers as some of the other ones do, right? So that's where step 2 becomes really, really important, because I think this got some of you when you were working on IXLs for today. You were comparing numbers that had different numbers of digits in them, and you weren't quite sure what to do. So after you stack them up and line them on their place values along the decimal point, here's what step 2 says to do. Now go in, if your numbers are not even as far as the numbers of numbers that they have, throw zeros in there. So remember over here, we had 4.8 and 4.826. All they did on this one, add 2 zeros here. And I think once you do that and you make all your numbers fair and even with each other, then it should be a whole lot easier for you to see which ones are bigger and which ones are smaller than the other ones, right? So if I'm looking at this first one, I got 4.826 and 4.800. Well, if I have 800 of something and 826 of something, which one is there more of, right? There's 826 is more than 800. Now, if you go over here and you're like, well, I got 826 or I got 8 here. Well, this is 8/10 and this is still 8/10. So you got to make sure that you're dealing with the same number of numbers, right? So throw those zeros in just to make sure everybody's nice and equal, okay? Step 3. Now that you've got everybody lined up on the decimal, they're stacked on top of each other, then you start comparing your columns one by one. So if there's any ones digits, start by looking at the ones. Nope, they're all tied, they all have 4s, so we go on to the next column. Next column, I've got 8, 8, 0, 0. And again, it depends on how you're comparing them, either greatest to least or least to greatest. Obviously, you know 8s are bigger than 0s, so those are going to be your bigger numbers up here. These are going to be your smaller ones. But then between these two numbers, which one is the bigger number? So if the 8s are tied, then I'm going to go over here. I got a 0 and I got a 2, which is bigger. 2 is bigger than 0. So this is actually going to be our biggest number. That's going to be our second biggest number. Now, as far as number 3 in this order, well, I got 4s, I've got 0s, I've got 8 and a 0. Well, 8 is bigger than 0, so this is going to come in third place as the third biggest number, and this guy on the bottom is going to be our last one. All right, so that's kind of what this whole anchor chart shows you. Line everybody up on the decimal, throw in zeros to make all your numbers equal with each other as far as the number of digits that they have, and then start comparing. Start with where you have numbers first and see who's bigger, see who's smaller. And then that's what step 4 says. Then you just order them from there. Now, the one thing that you don't do when you're putting them back in order, you don't rewrite like 4.800. Those zeros only are there to help you keep your spacing and know, how many digits the numbers have. When you write your final answers, just write the 4.8. So look it down here. They have 4.8. Those zeros kind of drop off. They're kind of showing you there as invisible. So just because you add zeros in to kind of help your thinking, don't put them back in there. All right. So that kind of talks about the anchor chart. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move forward and we're going to look at the guided practice for today. And we're going to use the skills that we did in the anchor chart. And this should go pretty quickly because we only have 2 numbers that we're comparing, right? So our first number, I've got 7 and 1100ths and 7 and 8800ths, all right? Starting over here, they're lined up on the decimals. I look at my ones, they're both 7s. I've got a 1 and an 8. Who's bigger? Well, 7.88 is bigger, or 7 8800ths is bigger. So I'm going to throw in a less than sign because 7 and 1100ths is less than 7 and 8800ths. Okay, next one. 3 and 2400ths, and I've got 3 and 7500ths. All right, lined up on the decimals, 3, 3, the same, 2 and a 7. Who's bigger? 3.75. So I'm going to throw in a less than sign because the greater than sign always points to the bigger number, right? Okay, here's my next number, 6.23, 7.23. All right, so they're lined up on the decimals. I start where my first column is. I got a 6 and I got a 7. Well, obviously, who's bigger in that one? This one has a bigger whole number this time. So the 7.23, looks like so far everybody's all pointing in the right direction, or in the same direction, right? Okay, next one, 6.7, 6.4. So I've got them written on top of each other, lined up on the decimals. 6 and 6 is the same. 7 and 4, 7 is bigger. So I need the bigger side to go to my 7.4. So this one is a greater than, okay? All right, now we get to number 5, 8.3, 8.30. So I do not have the same number of digits in the numbers that are listed there. So when I stack them up, they look weird because they are not equal to each other. So what we learned before is we throw in a 0 wherever there's one that isn't something, and then I start comparing. 8s are the same, 3s are the same, 0s are the same. Those are equal, and we knew that. 8 and 3/10 is the same thing as 8 and 30/100. 3/10 and 30/100 are equal. Okay, now I like these next ones because they really have us thinking about all of the skills that we learned in the anchor chart. So I got 3.58 and 3.5. Okay, they don't line up equally with the same number of digits. So we throw in a 0. 3s are the same, 5s are the same, 8 and a 0. 3.58 is bigger. So when I come over here, I need to make my greater than sign so it looks like that. All right, next one. I've got 7 and 6/10 and 7 and 17/100. Okay, not the same number of digits. Now look at that. Instantly, do you know 60 is bigger than 17? That little 0 trick and making your numbers even with each other is one of the biggest lifesavers you can do when you're comparing decimals, okay? 6.1 and 6.1. Do we need to even write that one out? Hopefully you see that those are equal, right? Okay, next one. And again, some of these are going to be pretty easy because they're a little bit obvious. I got 6.3 and 2.3. Lined everybody up. Who's bigger, 6 or 2? Well, 6.3 is bigger, so that's a greater than. All right, next one. 1 and 41/100, 1 and 9/10. Okay, so I got my numbers here. They're not equal number of digits, so I throw in a 0. 1s are the same, 4, 9. 1.9 is bigger than 1.41. I had somebody tell me once that, well, this one has more numbers in it, so it's bigger, right? And you can see that that's not a theory that holds up, because if you make them so they're the equal number of digits, you can see how that helps you out. Okay, next one, 6.96, 6.8. Here's my numbers. I don't have enough digits to make them equal, so now I do. 6s are the same, 9 beats 8, so 6.96 is going to be my bigger number. So this is going to be a greater than, okay? Hopefully this is like chugging right along here. 4s are the same, 7 beats 2, so this is going to go like this. All right, now I got 9.5 and 9.50. Not the same number of digits, so I throw in a 0. Well, look at that. They're the exact same thing, so throw that in there. Okay, the rest of these, here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to have you stop the video, and I want you to go ahead and finish the rest of the page. And then, after you finished 14 through 20, start the video again, and I'm just going to throw the answers on there so you can kind of see how you did these as you were working. All right, so stop the video now, and then pick it up and play again once you have finished 14 through 20. Okay, so now you should be back after you've done 14 through 20. You should have greater than, greater than, greater than, greater than, greater than, less than, and equal. So greater, 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 less, and equal should be your answer key for that one, okay? All right, so that's your guided practice. Again, if you follow through the steps that we talked about when we did the anchor chart together, even though we were only using 2 numbers to do today's guided practice, there are going to be times when you have more numbers than just 2 that you're comparing. This step skills is really going to come in handy when you do those, okay? All right, so let's talk about your homework. So for your homework, you have the handy dandy chicken sheet. All right, there's problems on this one. Now this one is going to be something that you're going to really want to use that anchor chart for. Line up these numbers so they are stacked. Don't try to do this across from each other like this. Line them up. Make sure you have the same number of digits. Like here, they're not the same. So throw those zeros in. By adding those zeros and making your numbers have the same number of digits all the way through, you have an easier job in comparing them with each other. All right. So do this entire sheet with greater than, less than, or equal. Make sure you share that with me so I've got that for your work for today. Now, the other thing, this is going to be a sheet we're going to kind of do in stages because this is a little bit of a challenge. So as you're going through this one, there are 4 different number sentences for each one of the numbers. 3 of these are wrong, and of course one of them would be right. So your job says to figure out which of these is right. So like in this first one, I have 1 and 75 hundredths. They say that's less than 1 and 57 hundredths. Then they have 59 hundredths. They say it's greater than 95 hundredths. Then they have 5 and 17 hundredths. They say that's less than 5 and 71 hundredths. And then they say 1 and 47 hundredths is equal to 1 and 74 hundredths. So what your task is, you kind of got to test all 4 of these to see which one is the actual true one, all right? There's whatever strategy you come up with. Test them, cross out the ones that are not right, narrow it down, and then circle the letter that it is for the true statement, and then you can just write your answer out over here, okay? You're only doing the first 5 for today, and this would be a lot of work to do in conjunction with everything else that we've done, so just give this one a shot and see how you do. I'll check those first 5 when you turn in your homework either today or tomorrow morning by 8 o'clock, and we'll see how you do in that. Okay, so hopefully follow along with your anchor chart, do some more practice on this. We'll get everybody up to secure before we know it. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.